Support comes from Mosby Building Arts. Mosby transforms unfinished basements into comfortable spaces for relaxing, entertaining, and spending time together. Make the most of your square footage. July basement sale. Details at callmosby.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Roughly 2 years ago, Wesley Bell upended Cori Bush to represent Missouri's St. Louis and St. Louis County-based 1st Congressional District. The contest was bitter, expensive, and nationally watched, and marked a major political leadership change for the St. Louis region. Now Bell and Bush are running against each other again. Bell is hoping he's done enough to fight against President Donald Trump's administration while Democrats are in the minority. And he's hoping to be able to do even more if the GOP loses control of the House later this year. But Bush contends that St. Louis needs a more assertive leadership style to fight against Trump during his final 2 years in office. And she's hoping city and county Democrats will follow the lead of places like Colorado, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maine in choosing congressional nominees that chafe against party leadership. Joining us now in studio together for this joint appearance are Congressman Wesley Bell and former Congresswoman Cori Bush. Bell has represented Missouri's 1st District since 2025, while Bush served as the 1st District Congresswoman from 2021 to 2025. Congressman, Congresswoman, welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with an issue that is central to many 1st District residents, and that's recovering from last year's deadly tornado in St. Louis. The people that want to know about this include Jackie Lewis Harris, who want to know both of your plans for recovery. So, Congressman Bell, what have you and other members of the Missouri delegation done to get Donald Trump's administration to do more for St. Louis?
First and foremost, what we've seen from the disaster relief process in this country is that it's broken and that it needs to be reformed and overhauled. Currently, the way this system works is that when a disaster hits, there's one person who's the sole arbiter on whether or not those funds are allocated, and that's the president. And if you want to appeal that ruling, if you disagree with it, you do have a right to an appeal. And that appeal is heard by Donald Trump, the president. And so what we've seen is that historically that's never been an issue. Democrat or Republican presidents have always rallied around Americans in need. But what we're seeing is that that is not the case anymore. So first, let me talk about what we've done. While many states were unable to get FEMA authorizations. For example, Maryland, that was hit with devastating floods, billions of dollars worth of damage, and they got $0 in disaster relief. California, compared to our $1.8 billion estimated damage from the tornadoes, California suffered about $200 billion worth of damage, and they got not one single dollar in supplemental funding. Now, once the tornado hit here, I got right to work. I was on the ground immediately, but also working with our delegation, which you all know is 6 Republicans and only myself and Congressman Cleaver, who will actually be here in St. Louis today. And so I got on the phone with each one of them. Sometimes that meant sitting in their offices as well to explain to them how important it was for them to join me in making certain that St. Louis got the resources that folks here needed. So I'm proud of the fact that we were able to get over $200 million and counting in FEMA disaster relief, but we still got more to do. And to this first part that I said, I want to address that part too. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not going to sit back and wait for another natural disaster to happen and not do anything about reforming the system. So we've started from day one, not only working to get resources here, but also introducing legislation to fix and reform this this disaster relief process that does not work for St. Louisans, that does not work for Americans. And we're going to continue fighting for not only the folks right here in St. Louis, but Americans all over the country who need our help.
Congresswoman, you've criticized Bell for not doing enough to provide adequate federal tornado relief, and you pointed to what happened in 2022 when the Biden administration signed an emergency declaration much quicker than usual in response to flooding in the 1st District. But is that really a fair comparison when the Biden administration valued federal participation in disaster relief and the Trump administration clearly does not?
Well, let's be clear. The process with FEMA wasn't smooth sailing. It wasn't easy back when the Biden administration was in power, was in control. We still had to fight. There was no one was just coming to hand money to St. Louis. So what I did was I hit the ground. Day one, I went out to the flooded areas. I was walking through flood water, walking through sewage, 10, 11 o'clock at night, knocking on people's doors, seeing what the need was, making sure people were safe, working to get people to safety who needed shelter. Work with local, state, and federal agencies to be able to stand up, and organizations standing up relief sites, resource sites, doing that immediately after. And then I took to television, to radio, to the internet, and everywhere I could go where I could sound the alarm that we needed funding for St. Louis, everywhere I could go. And, I've been criticized for wanting to be on TV a lot, but when I'm on TV, I'm talking about St. Louis because that's how people know. And so the more you speak about it, the more the urgency is there and the awareness. And so the declaration didn't come because the flood happened. It came because I kept pushing, and I wouldn't allow anyone to tell me no. And because of the way we organized local, state, and federal agencies, that push was there. We even worked with our state government to make sure that push was there. And that is how that happened. And I didn't wait to find out who, where control was. I called different secretaries. I called, my staff called their staff. We called everyone we could think of to tell them about the tornado and to ask them, if there was any way that we could get help with finding these resources. We worked with other members of Congress. That's how we were able to get the $82 million. Let me be clear. That $82 million just didn't rain on St. Louis because there was a flood. It was because we worked and we pulled every lever that we could find. And then Tashara Jones, former Mayor Tashara Jones, came and sat in my office. And she said, Cori, we lost 2 Metro Rail cars. They were damaged in the flooding and they're irreparable. They are out of commission and people are not, able to get to work. Seniors are not able to get to their clinics. We need help. I reached out to the Biden administration. They said that it was too late. There was no money in the budget. But I didn't stop there. I called former Senator Roy Blunt. I called different secretaries' offices. I kept getting shut down. My team kept getting shut down. Roy Blunt said yes from the beginning when I asked him if he would help. But after many phone calls and a few nights of pushing, we found the money in that omnibus package. But what I was told was, you're asking for $22 million, but we have a bucket that is $214 million. But the members of Congress over those states where this disaster recovery money is supposed to go, they aren't fighting for it. If you will fight for it, we'll make sure St. Louis gets the investment. And I said, well, if I'm fighting for $214 million, but St. Louis only will get 22. And what I was told was, yes, if you want it, and so I fought for the $214 million. St. Louis got $27 million. The then Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, came to St. Louis and came to the St. Louis area, did a press conference and thanked me for that $214 million that helped Mississippi and New York as well.
You mentioned your legislation about getting more information for community development block grant disaster recovery funds. But when we talked with Sarah Labowitz of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, she says the problem is not a lack of information, but Congress not authorizing money for the program. What do you make of that?
So any authorizations have to come through appropriations but signed by the president. Donald Trump has made it clear that his priorities are his unauthorized war in Iran, his ballroom for $1.8 billion, and his slush fund for January 6 rioters. They've been clear where their priorities are. And let's just be perfectly honest. The reason that St. Louis is not getting all of the disaster relief funds that we need is because we have a jackass in the office in the White House right now. We all know what that is. Under a Kamala Harris president, we know that we wouldn't be fighting for just to get things that Americans need. And I'm talking about not just in St. Louis, but working with our folks in California, Maryland, and the Gulf Coast states as well. So let's just say that. And it's a difference. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous when my opponent talks about working with the Biden administration, who clearly upvalued helping regular folks and helping folks in need. That was never an issue with a Joe Biden presidency. But as we've seen over and over, my opponent not only doesn't work across the aisle, which you got to work with them somewhat in order to get things done because you got to get to 218. But she also doesn't work with folks on her own side of the aisle. And so I'm proud of the folks who know us best. Democratic leadership is supporting me. The Congressional Black Caucus that knows us both is supporting me. Labor unions overwhelmingly are supporting me because they know I'm going to wake up every day and do the work of St. Louis.
Congresswoman, he just basically said that you don't work well with Republicans. Is that true?
Well, I seem to remember a day when we both were at a press conference, and we were there was a press conference that Senator Josh Hawley was there to talk about the RECA win, Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, the win, to make sure that St. Louis families were able to be finally compensated after asking for 40 years for compensation. And we were both at this press conference, but the only person that Josh Hawley acknowledged and said that he worked with to get this done was me. And I was not even in Congress anymore. I worked with Josh Hawley on Jana Elementary, making sure that we were able to find out if there was radioactive waste, if there was any possible exposure to the children of that school. We worked together on that. Jana Elementary then closed because they had to test. Now we moved that forward to RECA. And Josh Hawley and I worked on that. Let me also say, I worked with Senator Roy Blunt to get the West Florissant Avenue project done. That was $18 million, my first few months in office. I worked again with Roy Blunt, like I just said, on the $214 million when we needed money for disaster relief. So working across the aisle, I think I'm the one that has the actual wins working across the aisle. But the thing is this. If you're working across the aisle and you're not delivering, then what are you doing? Just making beer with Schmidt is not working across the aisle. I'm actually bringing home deliverables. But also when we talk about the Biden administration, President Biden actually folded my bills into executive orders because he liked, when we talk about energy, I had a energy bill back during COVID. He liked the bill so much. It was a $100 billion bill. And because he couldn't take that, he made the investment $100 million and still folded that into his executive order. And so when we talk about the Biden administration, I was able to work with Kamala Harris just recently when there was a lack of effort during the redrawing of the congressional districts back last fall when 3 legislators decided to occupy the House of Representatives here in Missouri. I called on Madam Vice President and I asked her for help. And what she immediately said, yes, immediately called those legislators, sent them pizza, and we still have that relationship today. So I worked with the Biden administration. My work talking about FEMA That's bureaucracy. That wasn't speaking about the Biden administration. They heard when I called.
Before we move on to other topics, Bell's campaign, Congresswoman, has accused you of soliciting funds to help tornado victims and putting that money into a political action committee. I just want to ask you straight up, did you do that?
So let me be clear. First of all, there is a memorandum of understanding between the C4 and the PAC. But what actually happened was it was a grassroots effort. There were emails sent out that barely raised over $3,000. Almost half of that in just one transaction was spent at a hardware store buying supplies to put on the ground. So when we're hearing this, that it's a smokescreen, because the question I have is, why spend so much time invested in what Cori Bush, what you can try to use to denigrate, to villainize Cori Bush, when as the incumbent, your time should be spent talking about how all the things that you have done, all the things that you will do, because your opponent, when you are the incumbent, your opponent doesn't have what you have, which is a bully pulpit in a different way. You have the opportunity and the access while being a member of Congress, and you can talk about that work. But instead, he spends all of his time trying to make up things that would be on TMZ. But let me tell you this, St. Louis, I was on the ground. I didn't go to the Cheesecake Factory the night of the tornado and hang out. I came to St. Louis. I hit the ground. I was going from door to door, day and night. I was picking up bricks. I was helping with mutual aid. I even worked with another group to be able to deliver mutual aid items to senior homes. We went into senior homes, multiple senior homes, as well as what we did on the ground. Day after day, week after week. That was the investment that I made. And there was no big, there was no, hiding of money or moving money. We raised money to be able to at least give people toothbrushes, to give out tarps.
I'm literally, if this wasn't so serious, it would be laughable. I am happy that my opponent is finally referring to the former vice president as Madam Vice President, as opposed to fascist, as she called
me. When did she say that?
Hold on. On October 18th, the video is out there in her own words of saying that her and President Biden are fascists. We're going to put it up on our social media in case people haven't already seen it. And I was hoping that we were on a candidate forum, and I asked her this question, and she said that she didn't say it. So I was hoping that once she saw the videos, that that would refresh her memory. But she's still holding on to this lie. So we're going to put it out there. So check us out, Bell from Missouri, on our social media. We'll put it back out there. But also, there's a couple inconvenient and uncomfortable truths that my opponent doesn't want to talk about. And one is that with respect to the RECA and the radioactive exposure things.
Compensation.
Those were activists originally came to Cori to try and get this legislation done. It sat on her desk for several months. Their words. And the problem is because Cori couldn't do anything, because she did not build relationships on either side of the aisle, it sat there. And so then, only after several months, they finally went to Josh Hawley. And Josh Hawley, listen, I don't agree with Josh Hawley on probably the color of the sky, but that's something that he worked on, that we all have worked on, and I can tip my hat and give credit when credit is due.
Well, I was there, Congressman. He thanked her, not you. You were standing right next to him. Was he sending a message that you weren't working hard enough on it?
I think that he was, but let me just be clear. I never take it offensively when Josh Hawley does not give me credit. Let's not forget Josh Hawley, who voted for health care cuts, who voted against legislation to bring costs down. Let's not forget that piece. So let's not have this revisionist history. But then let's come back to something, because I think judgment is certainly important. I think every Democrat, most independents, and a growing number of Republicans knew in the last election the best way to fight Donald Trump was to keep him out of office. And everyone understood the assignment. We knew that we had to rally around Kamala Harris and get her elected. And a little over 2 weeks from the election is when Cori made her statements that Kamala and President Biden were fascists and that she did not know if she could vote for them. So let's not try to clean it up now with our nice madam language, nice madam vice president language. You called her a fascist at a time when this election came down to a few thousand votes in 5 or 6 states, and everyone understood the assignment except you.
All right, I'm going to read this quote now. What I'm hearing is people say, well, we're talking about fighting fascism. We don't need the fascism that comes along with a Donald Trump presidency. But I feel like I'm seeing fascism right now, with a Joe Biden presidency and a Vice President Harris presidency.
Absolutely. What I'm saying, did I call them fascists? No. There was a rise in fascism starting with the Trump administration, and then how we were able to send so much money to go and bomb people in another country. And it was so much of that was funded by a lot of the people that fund Congressman Wesley Bell through these PACs. That funding, those Trump MAGA billionaires, that was what I'm talking about. The Trump MAGA billionaires, the folks that when I was barricaded in my office on my 3rd day in Congress, when I was sitting there in that office wondering what was about to happen. But I remember that AIPAC, the same group that had endorsed over 100 candidates, that same group, as I sit here and think about it, also heavily fund and support Wesley Bell's campaign. And he takes that. So when we talk about fascism, that's what I was talking about, that the fascism we're seeing, it came to the doorstep of Congress. And then also it is right in St. Louis. It's right at our doorstep. But let me add this. Let me add this. And I can ask my team to drop this video where immediately 1 hour after Kamala Harris, one hour after she announced she was running for president and Joe Biden endorsed her, I publicly endorsed her. But Wesley Bell said when he was asked, would he endorse her? He said that there were plenty of good candidates and there needed to be a process. So he didn't come right out and endorse her. And so when you want to have a revisionist history, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that when we talk about the Biden administration, we talk about Kamala Harris, those are folks that I worked with directly. Those are folks that I know. Those are folks that I can get on the phone right now and I can talk to Kamala's team. Madam Vice President will answer and talk with me. So what you will not do, and people of St. Louis, let me say this. When people try to make something up, to try to denigrate you or change to change exactly how the community sees you because they have nothing else to stand on, watch that.
Okay, Congressman, you'll be able to respond after the break, but we do need to take a break here. We'll be back with this joint appearance with Wesley Bell and Cori Bush on the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. We're going to continue our joint appearance with the 2 top contenders for Missouri's 1st Congressional District seat, Congressman Wesley Bell and former Congresswoman Cori Bush. Now, before the break, Congressman, the Congresswoman was mentioning that she endorsed Kamala Harris shortly after Joe Biden dropped out. For full disclosure, I talked with her, and she did. I cannot teleport and go to you. I wish I had teleportation powers, but I don't. But I do feel you should be able to respond. But then we're going to go to more issues after that.
Absolutely, and it's humorous to me to see my opponent twist herself into a pretzel to try to explain some things. And let's go back. In July, right before our primary, when it was opportunistic for her to endorse Kamala Harris, then she voted. She announced that she was supporting her. But then 2 weeks before the election, when now the stakes are high, now we are trying to beat Donald Trump because no one wanted to see a second term. That's when she made her statement on air during an interview that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were fascists and that she didn't know if she could support them. So we're not going to try to turn this into, oh, when it suits me, I'll do it. But then when we got closer to the election and we needed everyone on board, that's when her whole story changed. And also, we also got to address another thing. The Congresswoman has a penchant for taking advantage of and exploiting tragedies. For example, when COVID hit, her and her husband filed for PPP loans, which were never paid back.
That is actual defamation.
You'll have your chance to talk.
That is defamation.
Okay.
I will not allow you to say something that is actually untrue. You just said something that is actually untrue.
They filed for PPP.
They did not
forms.
do anything. They did not do anything.
Okay.
Let him
finish, and then you'll be able to
respond.
respond.
Let's finish. So
you're
that
not going to be able to talk your way out of this in court. So they filed for those. She was the sitting Congresswoman.
I didn't even know.
Okay. I'll grant you that. But then when the tornadoes hit, you opened a 501c4 and under the guise that it was for tornado relief and tornado victims. Then you took that money and put it into your PAC that you created for yourself. And then from there, you paid you and your husband salaries. And let me just be clear. Since 2020-ish, you paid yourself and your husband over $750,000 into your own pocket. And let me be clear, because folks will say, well, we're raising money and things of that nature. Every candidate from the president down to school board members raises money to get their messaging out. But what Cori has done is she's raised money and then routed it into her own bank account for her own use. What I would like to know is we all are required by law to release our personal financial disclosure forms. You didn't do it in the last election, and you haven't done it now, because that tells folks what you are actually taking. So what I would ask is, mine is out there publicly. I live on my salary. When are you going to finally release yours, Cori?
So first, let me go back. You see that he didn't answer your question about Kamala Harris and whether he endorsed her initially.
Oh, I did endorse her. I worked for Kamala Harris, and I'm sorry.
Don't
let me
interrupt
be
me.
clear.
Don't interrupt
you interrupted me.
Don't interrupt me.
I made it clear. I not only worked for her.
Did you endorse her?
I endorsed
did you endorse her
Yes.
immediately? No, you did
Yes.
not. My team dropped the video because now he's changing history.
Okay.
But
let's talk about your money.
No, let's talk about
Where's
what
your
you
money,
just.
Cori? Where's the money?
You know what? I would think that someone that was an actual prosecutor would know more about money, how PACs work, would know more about this is pretty incredible, actually. I'm really surprised by this.
Well,
PAC and a C4. We had both, but you know what? Let me go back to him saying.
Where's the money,
let me
Cori?
go back to this. $750,000. $750,000 from someone who makes $5,000 a month. $750,000. The math ain't mathing. Where he gets $750,000, I don't know. But maybe you're looking at the amount of money. Let's talk about it, because over $500,000 was used. Was it like $670,000 was used to settle your sexual discrimination case in your office, and your office, you could have gone to trial to clear your name in the name of your office, but instead it was settled out of court. And we're talking about the same St. Louis County, because St. Louis County taxpayers, you all foot that bill. That is St. Louis taxpayer money, even though St. Louis County is already having financial difficulties. But let me say this: I don't talk about your personal stuff, even though I know it. I'm going to keep my holiness and not talk about your personal stuff. But I will say this: what you will not do is defame my husband because you don't have the proper information. And just because you say something like Donald Trump, it doesn't mean it's true. And so I will say, because what the thing is, St. Louis, what he's saying is untrue. He is mixing up stuff that he heard from Fox News. But I will say this: my husband, his charges were dropped because the investigation that I had came back bipartisan, unanimous, no wrongdoing, and it was nowhere near $750,000.
Congressman, I'm going to let you respond, but I do want to just bring this up more generally, because several of our listeners have questioned why you continue to pay your husband money from your campaign for security. And I want to make it clear, it is not illegal to pay family members, and it's not illegal to pay yourself a salary, but a lot of people see it as unseemly and wrong. Well, what would you say to that?
So this is the thing. I had a security team that was very, very expensive, but I needed security because of all of the death threats, and there were attempts made on my life, which is housed at the FBI, the information on that. But the security team was really expensive, and my husband, who is a veteran, who was also a supervisor after he came out of the service, a supervisor for a local energy company, who was also a supervisor of security for casinos around the area. So he has a background in security. He would sit and watch my security team and watch them mess up. And so after telling them what to do over and over again, after a year of him watching this, and then after I started to lose security agents because they were being harassed for working with me, they were being harassed, they were coming to work late, all of that, I needed support. And so I reached out and I asked him, who was not my husband at the time, if he would come and take over security supervision because he had a background in it. And so he started doing that work, and it was documented. That work was it was seen that unanimously that there was no wrongdoing, that he was doing the work. People around St. Louis know, you see me, you see my husband. He is always at work. He doesn't get a day off. He travels with me. He is doing the work, because the thing is this: we would spend more money having someone who we have to pay a day, a night. We don't have that kind of money. Weekends to travel, an extra hotel, that's something we don't have to do. My husband has a background in it. And so to pay him to keep me alive, and I will lastly say this: there was an incident actually where my life was on the line, where someone was coming for me. My husband was able to save me in that situation.
Okay, so Congressman, there's a lot for you to respond to. She pointed out the $500,000 settlement from your time as St. Louis County prosecutor. I think you deserve to respond to that.
The reason that I've been calling for an actual debate, and so I appreciate the fact that she's finally done even this. I think that we should do televised debates, but she won't respond to that.
No, we asked you if you would have it and have an audience,
Congresswoman,
and that no one would be brutalized this time. That's what we asked for, and you wouldn't respond.
Congresswoman, actually, let him respond.
Yeah, we've actually given dates, and each of the local networks have the same response, that Cori's team will not respond or confirm a date. And so I'm going to add the reason that I'm glad we've been able to do this is because I have no problem answering every one of her questions, but she's got to answer mine. And so let's talk about that. When I came into office, there had been this young kid, African-American kid, who had been charged with not only fleeing from a crime, but assaulting officers. And that was charged prior to me getting into the office, and that charge was continuing. And so the officers who were not only the arresting officers, but also who were the victims, because the allegation alleged that this young kid had pointed a gun at them, came to us and told us that this kid is being overcharged and the information that you had is incorrect. We did our due diligence. We researched it, and we saw and we agreed, because we talked to the officers who, again, were the victims. And so we agreed to reduce that charge because it was the right thing to do. This particular prosecutor alleged that because I changed her recommendation, that I was discriminating against her. In that lawsuit, I was not named in the lawsuit, so I didn't get a chance to make a decision on how it was resolved. But as far as the underlying case, I was doing my job, and that young kid, that young black kid, is out because of my actions. Now,
so why was the case settled? Why didn't you try to fight it then?
No, I wasn't named as a defendant. I absolutely wanted to. That's what I wanted to do. And you notice once I went to Congress, that's when it was settled. After I was in Congress, and I didn't get a say, because you can talk to the attorneys, and they know that I was not happy that it was settled at all. But either way, it is what it is. And as far as the underlying case, I would make that call again. But let's get back to this. The Congresswoman set up a 501c4 in Delaware. She didn't, and then she started moving money around, and she did it under the cloak of darkness. She did this under secrecy, because what I've learned as a former prosecutor is when folks know that they're doing wrong, they don't want to talk about it. They want to keep it under dark. When they're doing a lot of cash transactions and things of that nature with this moving company and things of that nature, as well as these over 5 consultants that we've seen that my opponent has paid over $130,000 to, who all happen to have the same address as her. And so at the end of the day, those questions need to be answered, and you cannot talk your way out of it, because this is money going in your pocket. These are not money that you're raising to get your messaging out. This is money that you are enriching yourself with, just like Donald Trump.
Brief response, and then we have to move on to something else.
This is all he has to run on. St. Louis is making up lies about me. The 5 consulting firms, that was a consulting firm. Actually, it was someone who was one of actually looking back at the FEC filing, it's a Missouri consultant that was one of yours, actually, that was working for us, that no longer works for us, and he just made those companies under his P.O. box. It has nothing to do with me at all. So you really should stop.
Same address as you?
Not my personal address. That's his firm's address. So go and look it up. Go and look up Andrew Madras, his personal address, his P.O. box. That's
Are you going to give
the
money back, Cori? It's over $750,000.
How much money are you? $750,000
that you put in your own pocket, not raised for your own campaign. I would have no problem with that, because you've raised a lot of money, but you keep spending on yourself, Cori.
This is sad that this is your congressman. Why don't you answer those questions, Cori? It's sad that this is your congressman, and he would rather lie and make up something that is easily
reports,
Googleable.
Cori.
FEC reports. You can Google this information. So how about this? Will you give my disclosure actually is out?
It's out now.
It's
awesome because you didn't release it last time.
Actually, let me say this. The reason why is because it was actually a glitch that happened to us. And so it wasn't, we reached out to get the information.
It was a glitch.
But you know what?
What about the last election when you didn't release it?
Let me ask you this. Was there a glitch when you keep saying that you're fighting against Epstein, but you have taken $1 million into your campaign from someone who is listed in the Epstein files 2,000 times? Reid Hoffman got you got $1 million from him, but you keep crying out that you're fighting against Epstein. But the thing is this: if you say that you're fighting, but you're actually taking the money from the people that you're fighting,
all you want,
and your lies will never be true.
Congresswoman, let him respond, and then we have to go to a quick break.
Okay,
and very quickly.
Okay, so.
And if you do that, Congresswoman, I'm going to say very quickly to you. Continue.
The inconvenient truth is that the Congresswoman is committing a scam. And as a prosecutor, I know a scam when I see one. She raised money on the guys that was for tornado victims. She moved money into her account, and then she paid herself and her husband. That's why she's under investigation with the Attorney General again.
We are not under any investigation, and you are defaming yourself.
Everyone can see it for themselves.
You are defaming yourself, but it's okay.
Additionally,
the Congresswoman
it's
okay. He cannot run on his own. He cannot run. He's an incumbent. You all. He's been there for a year and a half. But you know what you're not going to do.
Congresswoman, let him finish, and then we really have to go to break.
And so what I'm going to say is that
20 seconds or less, Congressman.
My opponent has made an entire campaign on just attacking us and fighting and talking about division. And what I've been trying to focus on and what we have been focusing on is a vision for this region. I'm focused on St. Louis and moving and waking this sleeping giant up that we call St. Louis. We are losing jobs. We have been losing industry, and it is time to start doing the things that are going to move this region forward with jobs, resources, and opportunity. And I'm proud to be fighting on the front lines for folks right here in St. Louis.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll conclude our joint appearance between Congressman Wesley Bell and Congresswoman Cori Bush. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. Welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. We now come to our last part of our joint appearance with Congressman Wesley Bell and Congresswoman Cori Bush. So we have several topics we really want to get through, some of which I'm just going to ask for an answer 1 minute or less. First of all, Congressman, if you were elected, would you want to abolish ICE?
I've been public that ICE needs to be abolished, stripped for parts. Every single budget-related CR, the big ugly bill, which brought hundreds of millions of dollars to ICE, I'm a hard no, and I'm going to continue to do everything that I can to defund ICE, to strip it for parts, and I've been very clear and public about that, and I backed it up with my vote.
Congresswoman, same question to you.
Yes, I do want to abolish ICE, and I've been saying that for several years. Even before I ever entered Congress, I started doing that work, even going to the border and advocating for those who were in detention centers. We need to decentralize this system. We need to end mass deportations. We need to close these detention centers. In those contracts, absolutely, there must be a humane approach. And then redirect that funding to social programs. So absolutely, I'm not new to this issue. I've been working on this for many, many years. And I will say this, when the congressman, is saying that he wants to, abolish ICE, I'm glad that he finally came along to where I've been for several years. I'm glad he's finally speaking up and saying that now. So we the team of people around the country that want to abolish ICE, we're glad.
So you have voted for war powers resolutions to restrict Donald Trump from attacking Iran every single time. I mean, I already know the answer to that. Congresswoman, since you haven't gotten to vote, would you vote for war powers resolutions to stop Donald Trump from attacking Iran?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's an easy yes or no for both of you. Congresswoman, do you support what's known as Medicare for All, which would expand Medicare to everybody besides seniors?
Absolutely, and I've been an advocate for Medicare for All for more than 12 years, about 12 years. I've spoken out about it. I've ran on it every single time since my very first race in 2015. I've done sit-ins and teach-ins for Medicare for All, even from before I ever entered Congress. Every person should have access to health care, regardless of your job status, and the four-year ramp up to having a full Medicare for All is something that I am excited to see start. And so I will continue to do the work when I get back in Congress to make that happen.
Same question to you.
Yes, I think health care is a human right. And I think that having access to affordable and quality health care shouldn't be decided by what zip code that you stay in. But not only are those my beliefs, but also I've been able to back it up with my work. I was a part of our Democratic coalition that flipped 17 Republicans to get the Obamacare subsidies extended. And so it's not just about what we believe, it's also about being able to move the machinery to get things done.
So yes, you are for Medicare
Absolutely.
for all. Okay, just want to make sure. It's okay to both of you, and I'm going to give you a little bit more time for this one. Do you support or oppose continued military aid to Israel? Congressman, you just voted on something that Congressman Cleaver said was not an actual ban on Israel aid. So let's take that vote aside. You voted no on that. Will you continue to vote yes for military assistance for Israel?
I think we have to support our allies, not only in Israel and Taiwan and Ukraine. They are on the front lines of our sworn enemies. I'm old enough to remember 9/11. Those same forces are still trying to attack us. When we hear death to Israel and death to the West, we also hear death to America. And so now that said, I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but I love my country. I'm no fan of Bibi Netanyahu, but we're still going to stand with our allies. And when we disagree, there's going to be disagreements. And I've been able to say to his face of things that I disagree with him. But it's important that we stand with our allies in Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, Western Europe, because these are the same forces, the sworn enemies that are out to get us here at home.
Congresswoman, same question to you. Will you vote to cut off military aid to Israel?
Cutting off military aid right now where human rights violations are happening, yes, absolutely. While human rights violations are happening, while there is a, as stated by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, a genocide is happening in Gaza, stated by all of those different organizations and more, yes. Now, funding for other things that they may need, I have no problem with that. But to harm other people for weapons, absolutely.
Congressman, do you think that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza?
It is reported that Israel is a nuclear power. They have the ability to wipe out Gaza in a matter of minutes. And so when we went over there, one of the first things that we wanted to see was this humanitarian aid going in? And Israel is working with partners, and hundreds of trucks of humanitarian aid are going in. What the problem is, and what we all know, is that Hamas is a terror state that's supported by Iran, which is the leading sponsor of terrorism, and they are doing everything they can to intercept and disrupt that process so that the innocent folks there can't get it. And so I'll say this with a value statement. I want to see a durable and lasting peace for everyone in that region, Israelis, Palestinians, and everyone.
Congresswoman, you have I heard your last statement, but I do want to ask you: do you think there will be lasting peace in the West Bank or Gaza, especially in Gaza, if groups like Hamas are still in power, or do they need to be replaced by somebody else?
I think that there has to be human will for diplomacy. I think that the people who live in that region need to make the decision about who is governing them. You know, that should happen with the people who actually live there. So, should asking about should Hamas be in control, the region needs to be stabilized. And so I want to see self-determination for the Palestinian people as well as safety for the Israeli people. And it brings me back to a time when during the first, early on, back in at the end of 2023, Rashida Tlaib and I, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and I, we had a vigil on the steps of the U.S. Capitol for lives lost since October the 7th. Israeli lives and Palestinian lives, because we wanted to make it clear then that we value all lives, that our work is about humanity. And it was interesting that not very many members of Congress showed up, but for those that did, that was an honor to be able to stand for those that lost their lives.
Jason, and quickly, the reason that the self-determination for Palestinians is a problem is because of Hamas. Since there were elections over 20 years ago, there has not been one election since then. So to sit here and say that, the Palestinians should have self-determination, we all agree with that, but it's Hamas that is in the way of that and terrorizes their own citizens. So we need to get rid of the extremism, those extremist proxies that are funded by Iran.
But would you say Benjamin Netanyahu is an extremist that is also throwing Israel into the abyss?
I am not a fan of the prime minister at all. But what I will say is that Israel is a democracy. They have rights. They're able to go to the ballot box and vote. Women have rights to abortions in Israel. In Hamas, that is not the case. There is no LGBTQ community in Palestine because of Hamas. And so we do have to root out those extremists who are very well are weaponized. And so we're not, and we have to address that.
Congresswoman, I'm going to give you 20 seconds for the last word.
Yes, we have to root out extremists on both sides. And I do believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. I do believe that the people he has around him and his administration, that they are as well. People deserve to live whole and free, and that's all of the people in the region.
Congressman Wesley Bell, former Congresswoman Cori Bush, thank you for joining us today. And Bell and Bush will face off in the August 4th primary election to represent Missouri's 1st Congressional District. For more information on this race and other contests, you can go to our voter guide at stlpr.org/voter guide.
This episode was produced by Jason Rosenbaum, Emily Woodbury, and Fred Ehrlich, with production assistance from Maya Norfleet, Danny Wizentowski, Elaine Cha, and Lila Halabasich.
Audio engineering and sound design by Aaron Dorr. The politics editor is Fred Ehrlich.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, creating laundry rooms with improved storage, workspace, and everyday function for one of the home's most used spaces. Inspiration at callmosby.com.